He thought he was clever. At the wedding, right in front of hundreds of guests, and even the top boss, he introduced me as a useless, unemployed man. But what he didn't know was that I was the one who had founded the very company he was working for. And with just that one sentence, the entire career he had painstakingly built crumbled in an instant. Before I go on, let me take a moment to thank you, the one listening. If you find this story worth reflecting on, please hit subscribe and let me know where you're tuning in from. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to continue. My daughter's wedding day should have been a morning filled with sunlight and happiness, but instead of the familiar sounds of piano keys and laughter, the first thing I heard was the voice of Ethan Clark, the man about to become Clara's husband, and right in front of hundreds of guests, he introduced me with words I will never forget. "This is my father-in-law. He's been unemployed for years, living off his pension in the suburbs of Tacoma." A sentence that seemed casual, but was delivered with a half-smile and a condescending look. A ripple of muffled chuckles spread among his colleagues, young people working for the same tech company, Neurodyne AI. I didn't respond. My hands tightened lightly around the glass at the banquet table, keeping my emotions from spilling out. Every father hopes his daughter's wedding day will be a warm memory, but for me, the very first moment of the ceremony carved a cold wound. I glanced at Clara. In her ivory wedding gown, my daughter kept a radiant smile for the guests. But her eyes, the same eyes I once held hands with when I walked her to school, hesitated for a flicker, betraying confusion. She heard the insult clearly, yet she also listened to her own heart, a heart blinded by love, convincing itself that Ethan's words were only a joke. In that moment, I knew tonight would not be just a wedding. It would be a test, not only for Ethan, but also for Clara, to see the true character hidden beneath expensive suits and flashy promises. Ethan turned, patting my shoulder the way one might pat a subordinate. "My father-in-law here doesn't have to worry much. He's enjoying retirement for life. But me, it's different," he said louder, so his boss and co-workers could hear. "I have my whole career ahead. Neurodyne AI is preparing for its next big leap, and I'm confident I'll be considered for regional director within 1 year." I nodded slightly, offering just enough of a smile. But inside, every word he uttered cut deeper into my resolve, because the man boasting about his upcoming promotion had no idea that the person he was belittling was, in fact, the co-founder of the corporation he dreamed of ruling. If you are listening, remember this detail. From the very moment Ethan chose to use humiliation as a ladder for himself, he had already signed the sentence for his own career. Before I reveal the full truth behind that seemingly glamorous ceremony, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And don't forget to subscribe. Your support is the drive that keeps me exposing the truths others want hidden. That's how my daughter's wedding began. A public insult, a triumphant smirk, and a silent plan of response. But that silence was the storm waiting to erupt. Before all that happened on the wedding day, there was still one evening I will never forget. The evening at the Blue Heron Grill, the upscale restaurant by Lake Union, was where Ethan decided to have his official introduction with me. I remember that night clearly. Golden lights glowed against the dark wooden walls, and the soft hum of a cello floated among tables draped in crisp white linens. A young waiter led us to a window table overlooking the shimmering lake and the lights of the city. Clara sat beside Ethan, her face glowing with happiness. She introduced her man of her life with the kind of pride any father longs to see. But then Ethan's words slowly turned that evening into a play where I had no role but to watch in silence. Before we could even order drinks, Ethan leaned toward me, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Clara told me you're, currently between opportunities, right? Like semi-retired, but still wanting to do something for fun?" I blinked once. Between opportunities. a polished way of saying unemployed. I'm retired, I answered simply, placing the napkin on my lap. Ethan's smile widened, though his eyes never changed. Of course. Retirement is nice. At your age, the important thing is health and a few small hobbies. Leave the heavy lifting to our generation. My fingers gripped the glass tighter, but I smiled because I wanted to hear more. When the waiter brought menus, Ethan immediately ordered seared salmon with truffle mushroom risotto. Clara chose herb-roasted chicken. When it was my turn, I said softly, "Seafood soup and a sandwich, please." A flicker of surprise crossed Ethan's eyes. He raised his brows as if he couldn't believe it. Clara blushed. "Dad, today's special. Don't you want to pick something else?" "I like soup," I replied. Ethan forced a laugh, waving his hand. "It's fine, Clara. Everyone has their own budget. Some people like it simple. I totally get it." The word budget hit the table like a slap. In his eyes, one bowl of soup was enough to sum up my entire financial state. I shifted the subject. "The company you work for, Neurodyne, what's its focus in AI?" His chest puffed like a peacock. "I'm a senior manager of sales. In just 3 years, I boosted revenue by over 40%. Neurodyne leads the market in machine learning solutions for enterprises. I plan to become regional director within 12 months. Sounds busy." "Well, any success requires sacrifice," he said firmly. "That's what our generation understands. In your time, business was simpler. But now, you must constantly adapt and break old rules. Otherwise, you become dead weight." He paused deliberately, making sure I swallowed that phrase. Dead weight, a useless burden. Clara laid her hand on his, forcing a nervous smile. "Ethan is just passionate about his work." I set my spoon down, the metal ringing faintly against the bowl. "That's right," I nodded. "Surviving in today's world must be a battle for the strong." Ethan missed the edge in my tone. He kept lecturing. "Older people struggle to adapt. They're stuck in old ways. But me, I'm the new generation. Fresh thinking. That's why Neurodyne needs people like me, not those who just talk about the past." Sitting there, I suddenly remembered myself 30 years ago, dressed simply in a small cafe, dreaming of building an AI company to change the world. Robert Lang and I had survived countless long nights, crushing debts and near bankruptcies. And now the young man in front of me, eating salmon with truffle mushrooms, dared to call our generation dead weight. I smiled. Not from joy, but because I had seen it clearly. Ethan wasn't just arrogant, he was blind. And a blind man eventually walks into his own trap. That night, as we parted in the parking lot, Clara hugged me. "Dad, I know he's a bit full of himself, but he truly loves me." I stroked her hair. "Sweetheart, people reveal their true character when they think they're on top." Remember that Clara didn't answer. She turned away, gripping Ethan's hand tightly, but worry flickered in her eyes. As for me, I got in my car, driving through Seattle's dark streets. Anger was gone. Only one thing remained: cold calculation. That night, when I came home, I didn't turn on the lights. I let myself sit in the darkness of the living room, listening to the pendulum clock strike each hollow beat, as if counting down to something inevitable. My anger had already cooled the moment Ethan threw the words "dead weight" at me. What remained was only a cold stillness, the kind of stillness a man acquires after weathering too many storms, knowing that truth, revealed at the right moment, can sweep away any glittering facade. I stood up and walked into the room I had always called my sanctuary, my study. On the dark wood-paneled wall hung old frames. The day Robert Lang and I stood before the red brick building when Neurodyne AI was officially founded in 1993. The launch of our first product, when my hair was still jet black and my eyes burned with fire like Ethan's now. The Forbes cover in 2017 naming me the quiet architect of AI. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out a stack of old yellowed papers. The certificate of incorporation lay on top, with two messy signatures at the bottom, one mine, one Robert's. All these years, I kept it as a reminder that the greatest things often begin in cramped rooms with dreams that seem impossible. My eyes lingered on a photo taken in Robert's shabby garage. We were just past 30, working 18 hours a day, falling asleep on the cold cement floor. Nights when the money was gone, credit cards declined, and everyone outside thought we had lost our minds. But those nights built the foundation of Neurodyne, the foundation on which Ethan now strutted. I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. Robert picked up after the second ring. "Sam? Long time no see. So, how was dinner with the future son-in-law?" "Interesting," I said evenly. "And the company, how's it holding up?" Robert chuckled. "Same as always. Busy, chaotic, but still running on what we built. By the way, have you heard the name Ethan Clark? Sales department guy making a lot of noise. Got praised by the board for his numbers." My grip tightened on the phone. "Oh, I've heard of him and met him." "You've met him?" Robert sounded surprised. "He's got these so-called reform ideas. Calls it business model innovation. But I can't tell if it's ambition or arrogance. Always talking about removing dead weight. You know what I mean, right?" I closed my eyes. Dead weight. The exact phrase he had spat out in front of me just hours earlier. I know. Truthfully, it wasn't strange that Ethan didn't know me. After Neurodyne's success, I deliberately withdrew from the media spotlight. Robert was the public face while I stayed behind, focusing on strategy and research. For years, I was part of every plan, but the name Samuel Whitmore faded from headlines and conferences. Now that anonymity had become the perfect mask. Ethan looked at me and saw only an ordinary retired old man. On the other end, Robert went quiet for a moment before asking softly, "Sam, what are you thinking?" I looked again at the framed photos on the wall, the youthful faces of the original team Ethan dismissed as obsolete. "I think," I said slowly, "there are lessons young men can only learn the hard way." "Don't tell me you're plotting something," Robert laughed, though uneasily. "I don't need to do much," I answered. "I'll just let him expose himself. The wedding will be the perfect stage." Silence hung on both ends of the line. Finally, Robert sighed. "If anyone can teach him that lesson, it's you, Sam. But remember, Clara is the one who'll feel it most." "I know," I whispered, "and it's because of my daughter that I must." After hanging up, I sat back in the worn leather chair. There was no anger left, only certainty. Ethan thought I was a useless old man clinging to his daughter for scraps of dignity, but he didn't know I was the one who had written the very code and strategies that built the company he was desperate to climb. In silence, I took a blank sheet of paper and began writing down Ethan's words, between opportunities, hobbies, budget, and dead weight. Each one is like evidence in a courtroom. I knew the day would come when they would cut back against him. The Seattle night was windless. Outside, Lake Union reflected the city lights, so calm it could fool anyone into thinking everything was at peace. But in this room, a storm had been planted, and when it rose, it would sweep away not just a wedding day, but a career built on arrogance. The next morning, as sunlight glistened on the rooftops of old wooden houses in Tacoma, I heard a familiar knock. Clara stepped in with a steaming cup of coffee, her face still shadowed by last night's tension. She set the cup on my desk, the same desk where I had laid out photos and old documents the night before. "Dad," she began, her voice lower than usual, "I need to ask directly. Why do you let Ethan believe you're just a poor retired man?" I looked at my daughter, her blue eyes shining in the morning light. In them I saw a reflection of myself 30 years ago, just as determined, but laced now with worry. I drew a long breath, then answered slowly, "I didn't lie, Clara. I just didn't tell the whole truth." "That's still lying," she shot back. "I saw the photos in your study, the Forbes article calling you the quiet architect of Neurodyne. I know you're not useless like he thinks, So why did you let Ethan humiliate you? Why did you let me sit there unable to defend you? I stood and walked to the window, gazing at the small garden where Clara once helped her mother tend roses as a child. Sweetheart, life isn't fair. People judge by appearances, by a bowl of soup, by a suit. But it's in those very moments that true character shows. If Ethan had treated me with respect, even while thinking I had nothing, I would feel safer giving you to him. But you saw. He chose another path, Clara clenched her fists. You're testing him? Even when I'm the one most affected. I turned back, meeting her eyes. Yes, and because of you, I must. Love can blind people, Clara. But disrespect, especially toward family, will destroy everything. I don't want you to pay the price of a broken marriage later. Tears welled in her eyes. You've been absent for so many years. When Mom was sick, when I needed someone at graduation, you were always buried in Neurodyne. I forgave you, thinking you did it for my future. But now, when you finally stand beside me, why do you choose silence and let people insult you? Her words cut deeper than any insult Ethan had thrown. I remembered the nights lost in the garage, missing her birthdays. I remembered my wife's tired eyes before she passed, whispering, "Promise me you'll be there for Clara. Don't leave her alone." That promise still echoed in me. I placed my hand on Clara's shoulder, my voice hoarse. My love, I wasn't silent to surrender. I was silent so you could see the truth with your own eyes. I wanted you to know how the man you plan to marry behaves when he thinks no one important is watching. Clara sobbed quietly. She bowed her head, tears dripping between her clenched fingers. After a while, she looked up, her eyes red but her gaze steady. If that's the case, I'll keep the secret. But promise me one thing. Don't turn this into revenge. I don't want my love crushed by pride. I nodded softly. I promise. This isn't revenge, Clara. This is to protect you. She hugged me tightly, for the first time in years, clinging as if to hold on to the father she once felt so distant from. I closed my eyes, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. In that moment, I knew I had chosen the right path, no matter how thorny it would be. Outside the window, morning sunlight fell on blooming roses, but inside me, I knew I was stepping into a storm, and Ethan Clark would soon learn the true cost of arrogance. After that tense morning, I thought Clara would urge Ethan to rein in his behavior, but the opposite proved true. My future son-in-law seemed even more emboldened. In the weeks that followed, whenever we shared a table or met at Clara's place, Ethan found a way to plant another jab, neatly wrapped in a patronizing tone. One evening, we had dinner at their new apartment. Clara cooked the creamy pasta she'd made since college. Ethan took a bite, praised his bride-to-be to the skies, then turned to me with a slick look. "Would you like me to introduce you to a few friends in the industry, Uncle Sam? Maybe they have some part-time work that fits. Nothing too heavy, more like a small consulting role. Just enough so you still feel useful." He used useful with a chill, as if I were an old tool with a bit of value left if squeezed one last time. Clara forced a smile and shifted the topic to home decor. I simply lifted my wine glass, took a small sip, and said nothing. Another time, when the three of us attended a friend's birthday party, Ethan slung an arm around me in front of the crowd. This is my future father-in-law. A very composed man. Not busy with business plans like us. He has plenty of time for personal hobbies. You know how it is. At his age, gardening and chess are the best fit. The group let out polite laughter. I heard it and had no trouble sensing how much pity was mixed in. Clara blushed and hurried to pull me aside. Ethan, however, kept beaming as if he had scored again in a game whose rules only he understood. The tipping point came on a Sunday afternoon when Clara invited her college best friend Rachel over for dinner. Rachel was quick-witted, with sharp eyes. As soon as we sat down, Ethan began his usual performance. He talked about upcoming projects at Neurodyne, about the revenue numbers he had just hit, and about how the board would certainly consider him for regional director soon. Then he added casually, maybe Uncle Sam should attend a few startup conferences at least to catch up with the trend. Just sitting at home reading the paper is a bit outdated. I said nothing, but Rachel looked straight at him, her brows drawing together. Throughout dinner she glanced at me several times, her eyes seeming to ask what Clara had never dared to. When Ethan left the table to take a call, Rachel leaned toward Clara and whispered just loudly enough for me to hear, "Are you sure? This man, is he the one you'll give your life to? I don't see any respect for your father in his eyes." Clara faltered, squeezing her friend's hand. I saw the struggle in my daughter's eyes. On one side, a blind love for Ethan. On the other, trust in me. The father she knew better than anyone had never lived as a complacent old man. That night, as I walked Rachel to the door, I heard her whisper once more, "Uncle Sam, please don't stay silent forever." Clara needs to see the truth clearly. I only smiled, neither promising nor denying. In my mind, every one of Ethan's lines and every pitying look from those around us had become new pieces on the chessboard I was arranging. I knew it wasn't time to drop the curtain yet, but the necessary pieces for the game were taking shape, and Ethan, in his arrogance, still had no idea he was building a cage out of his own words. I was not someone accustomed to plotting payback. All my life, I believed time and truth are enough to teach costly lessons. But Ethan was different. He didn't just insult me. He planted doubt in Clara's mind about the worth of her own father, and that is a line I cannot allow anyone to cross. On an early April morning, I drove to downtown Seattle. My first stop was Armstrong and Company, the old tailor on Pine Street. In the three-way mirror, I stood straight in a new suit, charcoal Italian wool with faint pinstripes that appeared only when light grazed them. The shop owner adjusted the shoulders and smiled. "Mr. Whitmore, this one will give you gravitas without any showiness." I nodded. That was exactly what I wanted. No flash, no flourish, but enough that when I stepped into the reception hall, not a single glance could dismiss me. Next, I dropped by Cartwright Jewelers. The salesperson laid a pair of platinum cufflinks engraved with the Neurodyne logo on black velvet, a special edition with only 2 pairs. One mine, one Robert Lang's. I picked them up, the light from a tiny diamond reflecting like a flame of the past flaring in my mind. When I fastened them to my sleeves, I knew Robert would recognize them instantly. And Ethan, he would understand nothing until it was too late. The next day, I went to First National Bank. Jonathan Pierce, my longtime financial manager, raised his brows at the figure I wrote on the slip. $75,000, are you sure? I signed the authorization, the ink soaking strongly into the paper. It will be Clara's wedding gift. I want her to see with her own eyes that her father was never ill. Burden Jonathan nodded and handed me a cashier's check, printed with my daughter's and Ethan's names. I slipped it into a thick envelope and placed it in my desk drawer, right beside a photo of my wife in her youth, smiling gently. But I wasn't preparing only for myself. I needed witnesses, the very people Ethan had branded dead weight. I called Linda Cho and Mark Davison, 2 veteran employees who are long retired. Both were core engineers in Neurodyne's early days, and both had been belittled by Ethan more than once in meetings for being out of date. They came to my house that afternoon, still wearing the kind smiles of a diligent generation. When I invited them to the wedding, they looked surprised, but after I briefly described Ethan's behavior, their eyes darkened. "If you need us to bear witness," Mark said, "we'll be there." When dusk fell over Lake Union, I walked alone along the brick path by the water. Ripples mirrored the sunset's orange-red hues. I thought of my wife, of how she used to hold Clara and tell me, "Let her grow up in respect." I hadn't fully kept that promise while burying myself in Neurodyne for years, but this time I would not fail. In my mind, each detail lined up like pieces on a board: the charcoal suit, the platinum cufflinks, the $75,000 check, the presence of Linda and Mark. all waiting for the right moment. And when that moment came, Ethan would have no way out. That evening, back at my small house in Tacoma, I turned on the desk lamp in my study. Under the warm yellow light, the items prepared for the big day sat neatly before me. I took a seat, opened my old leather notebook, and wrote a single line. Wedding Day, Final Lesson. The rehearsal dinner was held at Emerald Bay Hall, a grand banquet room with high ceilings where bright crystal chandeliers cast reflections on pristine white linens. It was the last meeting of both families before the wedding day, and it was also where Ethan once again displayed his pride. I arrived early, wearing an old navy blazer with frayed cuffs, deliberately keeping a modest look. When I stepped into the foyer, I saw Ethan in the middle of a group of colleagues, laughing loudly, a glass of red wine in hand. Clara stood beside him, her face aglow, yet her eyes flicking toward me again and again, as if to remind her groom to hold back. "Here he is," Ethan called out when he spotted me, his voice carrying through the room. He swung an arm around my shoulders the way one might around an old friend. "Everyone, allow me to introduce my future father-in-law. He lives quite simply, not much concerned with work matters. A very calm man, enjoying his old age in Tacoma." His colleagues let out social chuckles, a few nodding as if that introduction neatly defined my worth. I just smiled faintly, slipped out from under Ethan's arm, and took my seat. During dinner, he returned to his usual routine, talking about last quarter's sales, about how he helped older employees understand new tech, about eliminating outdated processes. Then he lowered his voice, just enough for the table to hear, "A career is like a high-speed train. If you can't keep up, it's best to get off early and make room for the young generation." He glanced at me, as if to be sure I caught the implication. Ethan's mother, Margaret, sat at the head of the table and chimed in with a sweet, icy smile. "Clara is truly fortunate. She's marrying into a family with a bright future. As for your father, at least he won't become a burden to you." Clara flushed, twisting her napkin in her hands. I looked at my daughter, gave a slight shake of my head, signaling she didn't need to react. I was used to sugar-coated knives like these. When dessert was served, Ethan leaned toward me, voice lowered like a piece of advice. "Uncle Sam, my boss, will be there tomorrow, Mr. Robert Lang, one of the most important figures at Neurodyne. You should mind your attire and your words. Leave an impression. Just enough. I don't want any lack of finesse to affect my career." I set down my spoon, dabbed my mouth with the napkin, then looked him straight in the eye. My voice was low, but clear enough for the whole table to hear. "Ethan, you should be careful with your judgments. Some things, once brought into the light, cannot be taken back." The table fell silent for a few seconds. Ethan arched an eyebrow, then burst out laughing and patted my hand lightly. "Uncle Sam, you're really something. I've never misjudged anyone. That's why I'm successful." I simply nodded, a brief smile on my lips. "Tomorrow will tell us whether you're right or wrong." Under the glitter of crystal lights, Clara watched me with worry, and Rachel, my daughter's best friend, frowned slightly, as if she had just heard something heavier than a warning. The rehearsal night ended with the loud laughter of Ethan's friends, but inside me, a frightening stillness was growing. I knew I was ready, and tomorrow, the game Ethan thought he was winning would end on a very different board. The night before the wedding, my small house in Tacoma sank into quiet. On my desk, every item was prepared and arranged with careful ritual. The charcoal suit from Armstrong and Company hung neatly on a wooden hanger, sharp creases catching the soft glow of the desk lamp. The black velvet box, holding the platinum cufflinks engraved with the Neurodyne logo, sat beside it, the tiny diamond at the center glittering like the only star in a clouded sky. And inside the thick envelope, the $75,000 check lay still, my signature sweeping strong across it like a declaration. I have never been dead weight. I sat in the old leather chair, turning the pages of a worn leather notebook. On the newest page, I wrote a few lines to Clara. My daughter, if tomorrow what I do feels too cruel, remember that it all comes from love and responsibility. I don't want you to see only the gentle face of the man you love. I want you to see his shadow, too, so you can choose with both heart and reason. I folded the page, slipped it into a second envelope, and locked it in the drawer. That would be the final explanation if everything fell apart. My phone buzzed. A message from Clara. Dad, I'm so worried. Ethan keeps repeating that his boss will be there tomorrow. I'm afraid when things happen, he'll hate you. I stared at the line for a long time, then replied, Sweetheart, what matters is that you see clearly who you're marrying. If your love is strong enough, it will endure. If not, you need the truth sooner. Then I set the phone face down on the desk, not waiting for a response. I stepped out onto the porch. Seattle's night was still, a chill from Lake Union brushing my face. City lights shimmered faintly on the distant water. I drew a deep breath, felt the cold trace my spine, and exhaled slowly. In that moment, I saw it clearly. Tomorrow would not be just a wedding. It would be a public trial, where Ethan would indict himself with the very words he had spoken for months. I went back to my study, carefully opened the velvet box, and fitted the cufflinks onto the cuffs of a freshly pressed white shirt. Watching them catch the light, I thought of Robert Lang. I pictured him stepping into the reception hall, his gaze landing on the cufflinks, instantly recognizing that his co-founder was still there, never having left the game. And I pictured Ethan's face when he heard Robert himself call me partner in front of every guest. I removed the links, set them back in the box, and locked it. Then I turned off the desk lamp, letting the room sink into darkness, save for the faint glow from the porch. I sat still, listening to my heartbeat. Steady. No anger, no fear. Only the cold composure of a man who knows he holds the whole board in his hands. When the clock struck midnight, I stood, straightened the curtains, and told myself, tomorrow the mask will fall, and my daughter will see who truly deserves to walk beside her. The next morning, Seattle's sky was a rare clear blue. Strands of golden sunlight pierced thin clouds, spilling over the glittering surface of Lake Union. I drove to the Harborview Hotel, where Clara's wedding would be held, feeling both solemn and calm. The charcoal suit fit my shoulders perfectly, polished black shoes tapping a steady rhythm on the marble lobby floor. Inside, the venue was resplendent, white orchid sprays lining the aisle, a string quartet tuning up, colored glass panes casting vibrant patches across the red carpet. Clara emerged from the dressing room in a long wedding gown, a sheer veil hiding half her face, but not the glow in her eyes. When she saw me, she paused for a beat, then came over and gripped my hand. Dad, she whispered, thank you for being here. I squeezed her hand, holding back everything I felt. You're beautiful today, Clara, and whatever happens, you will always be my greatest pride. The chapel doors opened and the organ sounded. I guided Clara down the aisle. 2 rows of guests rose as one, turning to us. I walked slowly, each step etched into memory, full of pride and worry. Up front, Ethan stood in a black tuxedo, his smile gleaming, his eyes fixed on Clara with possession more than love. I brought my daughter to the steps where the minister waited. Who gives this woman in marriage today? He asked, voice warm and deep. I do, Samuel Whitmore. With all my love and hope, I replied. I placed Clara's hand into Ethan's. For a moment, the 3 of us stood together before hundreds of people. I looked straight into Ethan's eyes, saw a confidence bordering on arrogance, and knew he still had no idea what awaited him. In the front row, I caught sight of Linda Cho and Mark Davison, the veteran employees I had invited. They sat quietly, watching with steady eyes, like witnesses destined for a crucial hour. Across the aisle, Ethan's mother sat proudly, chin lifted, her lips curling as she glanced at me, as if my simple attire were the final proof confirming her contempt. The ceremony proceeded with dignity. Clara read her vows, voice trembling but full of feeling. Ethan read his, too, smooth and confident, but in every word I sensed calculation more than affection. When the minister declared them husband and wife, applause and bells rang throughout the room. I stood there, watching my daughter embrace her husband in ecstatic joy, and for a brief moment I saw only Clara, the little girl who once held my hand on the way to school, now grown and choosing her own fate. But my worries still smoldered. I knew the main act had not ended. The wedding ceremony was only the beginning, and the reception, where Ethan would lead me to Robert Lang, would be the true moment of reckoning. I adjusted my cuffs, feeling the cool weight of the platinum links. They were there, silent, waiting to speak for me. As guests began to leave the chapel, Ethan bent down and whispered, his tone a warning. "Uncle Sam, at the reception later, please keep your composure. Don't make anyone uncomfortable, especially with my boss around." I looked at him and smiled faintly. "Don't worry, Ethan. I'll make today truly memorable." He laughed, thinking I had promised to stay quiet, but inside I knew it was a herald of a moment he would never forget. The ballroom of the Harborview Hotel glittered under crystal chandeliers, the banquet tables draped in white linen, dotted with orchids and gleaming glassware. The string quartet poured smooth melodies into the air, mingling with lively chatter. The luxury was so complete that even the smallest details, the napkins folded into swans, the golden champagne, shone with opulence. I stood near the bar, holding a glass of wine lightly, observing the scene as though from the outside. Clara laughed radiantly among her friends, her wedding gown flaring like a white blossom. Seeing her joy softened my heart for a moment, but reason reminded me that the real moment was still ahead. Across the room, Ethan busied himself ushering guests, confidence radiating. He held Clara by the arm, leading her to greet each circle of colleagues. From time to time he glanced at me, his eyes glinting with arrogance. That old man is nothing but the backdrop to my success. I didn't react, only sipped my wine in silence, letting him grow careless. Then the moment I had waited for arrived. Robert Lang, CEO of Neurodyne, entered, silver hair neatly combed, bearing the authority of a man who had steered the company through storms. The room paused half a beat at his arrival. Everyone recognized his weight. Ethan immediately left his group, dragging Clara along, rushing toward Robert like a man desperate to prove himself. I followed slowly, keeping just enough distance. Ethan shook his boss's hand with a wide smile, speaking loud enough for all nearby to hear. "Mr. Lang, allow me to introduce my wife, Clara, and my father-in-law, Mr. Sam Whitmore. He's been retired for years, living quietly in Tacoma. A very calm man, enjoying old age." The words fell like a blade. A few guests smiled politely, some cast pitying looks. I stared at Ethan and saw the familiar triumphant glint in his eyes. But then Robert's gaze dropped to the cufflinks on my wrists. He froze. His usually steady eyes widened, then slowly lifted to meet mine. Good heavens! Sam? Sam Whitmore? A wave of silence swept the hall. Every eye turned toward us. Ethan blinked rapidly, his face draining of color. You know him?" Robert released Ethan's hand and stepped forward, embracing me like a long-lost brother. "Know him? He is the co-founder of Neurodyne, the man who built this company with me from nothing. Without Sam, there would be no us today." Murmurs rippled across the hall. Colleagues who had heard Ethan's boasts now stared at him in disbelief, while Linda and Mark, the old employees I had invited, exchanged quiet, knowing smiles. Ethan's face turned from flushed to ashen. "No, impossible. He's just a retiree." His voice cracked, shattering like glass. Robert spun on him, his eyes like steel. "A retiree?" Sam laid the foundation of this company. Over 30 years of work, dozens of patents. Do you have any idea whom you've been insulting? The hall held its breath. Clara looked at her new husband, lips trembling, tears welling. I stood still, adjusting my sleeve slightly, so the chandelier light caught the platinum cufflinks more sharply. Without a single word, the truth revealed itself. Ethan gaped, struggling for his voice. I didn't know. He never said. Clara never told me. But his words drowned in the whispers of the crowd. Robert's tone cut like nails. Monday you report to HR. We'll discuss attitude and respect. I cannot keep a man arrogant enough to scorn the very founder of the company. Ethan turned pale, his hands shaking as he gripped the champagne glass until it spilled over. Clara covered her mouth, her eyes wide with both terror and heartbreak. And I stood calm, letting the silence and the eyes of the room speak for me. The air thickened, the quartet had gone quiet. Only clinking glasses and spreading whispers filled the space. All eyes fixed on Ethan, the man once hailed as the sales star, now laid bare as a fool before hundreds. His lips quivered, his eyes darted, seeking escape. Then, as though his legs could no longer hold him, he collapsed to his knees before me and Robert. Gasps echoed. His mother shot up from the front row, clutching her purse, her face burning with shame. Clara sobbed into her hands, trembling between love and horror. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Ethan stammered, his voice choking. On his knees, his palms shook against the cold marble floor. I didn't know. If I had known who you were, I would never. Please forgive me. Robert crossed his arms, his eyes hard. You don't need to apologize to me. The man you insulted for months stands right in front of you. The crowd's eyes bore into me. I drew a deep breath, then stepped toward Ethan. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot, panicked like a drowning man begging for rescue. Ethan, I said, my voice not loud but clear in the hushed hall, you called those before you dead weight. You advised your future father-in-law to find part-time work to feel useful. You introduced me to your boss as Unemployed. You thought you were proving your cleverness, but all you proved was that you measure people by wallets and soup bowls. Sweat poured down his face. His throat rasped with broken sounds. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I'll change. I leaned closer, my gaze cutting like a blade. If you truly seek forgiveness, stand up. Look around this room and apologize, not only to me, but to all those you scorned. Apologize for forgetting that respect is the only foundation that makes a man worthy. Ethan trembled as he rose, clinging to the table's edge. He turned in a slow circle, facing the eyes of hundreds. I'm sorry. I was arrogant. I disrespected people who did not deserve it. I was wrong. Please forgive me. His voice cracked, shaking, vanishing in the murmurs of the crowd. I let him speak, let him swallow the humiliation before those who once admired him. When he fell silent, I pulled a white envelope from my breast pocket. Clara and Ethan's names were printed on it, inside the $75,000 check. I handed it to Clara, placing it firmly in her hands. Clara, this is my wedding gift. Not to prove I am wealthy, but so you know, I have never been a burden. I have always been able to provide for you, no matter who you chose as husband. The room went still. Clara broke into sobs, clutching the envelope to her chest, tears streaming. Ethan bowed his head, shame etched into every taut line of his body. Robert set a hand on my shoulder, his voice warm but firm. Sam, you've just taught us all a lesson no business school could ever teach. Applause erupted, first scattered, then swelling into a thunderous wave, echoing through the hall. Not for the man who had just wed, but for the father who endured in silence and revealed the truth at the moment it mattered most. I turned back to Ethan, my voice low but softened. Son, today's lesson is costly, but it is still a chance. Never forget, a career can be rebuilt, but honor, once lost, is almost impossible to recover. Treasure this second chance, if you truly want to save yourself. His face was streaked with tears and sweat, nodding over and over, but in his eyes there was not only fear anymore, there was true remorse. The wedding feast went on, but the atmosphere had completely changed. No more arrogant laughter or pitying looks. Instead, there was a hush, a mix of curiosity and admiration, as if everyone had just witnessed not only a marriage, but also a lesson in character. Clara sat beside me, her eyes red yet glowing. She gripped my hand, trembling but full of gratitude. "Dad, I've never seen the truth so clearly as today." "Thank you for not abandoning me," she whispered. I squeezed her hand gently and replied softly, "I made a promise to your mother. I cannot let you step into marriage without knowing exactly who you're giving your life to." Ethan, after his humiliation, sat quietly at the table. His expensive tuxedo now looked disheveled, his face hollowed in just a few hours. But I noticed he didn't run, didn't try to deny. He sat with his head lowered, absorbing every word and glance around him. Perhaps for the first time in his life, he was learning silence. Robert stepped forward, raising his glass before the guests. "Today we celebrate not only Clara and Ethan. We are reminded that respect is priceless. No company, no title, no money can replace it. I am proud to call Sam Whitmore my partner, but above all, I respect him as a man." Applause rose again, this time warm and heartfelt. I looked at Ethan. He stood, his voice hoarse. "Thank you all. I know I was wrong, very wrong. But if Clara still stands by me, if you still give me a chance, I promise I will change. Not to salvage a career, but to be worthy of this family." Clara wept and stepped into her husband's arms. In her eyes I saw love, but also a clarity she had never had before. She had seen the dark side of the man she chose, and now she knew how she would walk with him, not in illusion, but in truth. I placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, my tone deep but no longer sharp. "Second chances don't come often. Value this one." He nodded firmly, his eyes finally glimmering with humility I had never seen in him. The evening ended with slow music. I sat back, watching Clara dance with her husband, her eyes shining yet more thoughtful than ever. I thought of my wife, of the promise I had made long ago, and knew I had fulfilled my duty. As I left the hotel, the night wind rustled through the trees by the lake, the silver moonlight rippling on the water. I walked on with rare peace, not because I had defeated Ethan in a game, but because my daughter had been protected by the truth. And truth, in the end, is the most human gift a father can give his child. Today's story ends here. But what remains is not the downfall of an arrogant man. It is the lesson that respect is the true foundation of happiness. If you believe truth always finds its voice, hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Your presence is the strength that allows me to keep telling the stories no one else dares to tell.